All right, what if getting good grades didn't just earn you a pat on the back, but actual cryptocurrency you could spend? It sounds a little wild, right? Well, we're going to dive into a fascinating research paper that proposes exactly that, using a custom-built EduCoin to totally supercharge student motivation.
So let me ask you, when you think about the biggest challenge for university students, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For a lot of us, it's probably tuition costs, or maybe the stress of final exams. But the real answer? It actually changes a lot depending on where in the world you are.
And this is where things get really interesting. Most educational research comes from what are called weird countries. That's an acronym for Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. In the US, for example, a huge problem is students dropping out. Get this, a staggering 37% don't finish a four-year degree even within 6 years. But the paper we're looking at is set in Vietnam, and there, researchers found a completely different problem. It wasn't about students leaving, it was about a lack of motivation, getting them to care enough to improve, which has this huge downstream effect on the entire job market.
So yeah, that's really the heart of the issue in this context, motivation. For a specific key group of students, the usual threat of, hey, you might fail this class, just doesn't work. It doesn't scare them, and that creates a problem that ripples out way beyond just the university walls.
Now, people have tried to tackle this before. You've probably heard of things like digital badges, right? They're cool, they recognize when you've achieved something, and they can give you a little motivational boost. That's a good start. But these researchers asked a much more powerful question. What if that recognition wasn't just a symbol, but a real reward you could actually go out and spend? And that brings us to their central big idea, the EduCoin. Now, I want you to forget everything you think you know about Bitcoin or Ethereum. This is something else entirely. It's a cryptocurrency designed from the ground up with one single purpose, to solve this very specific student motivation problem. Probably the easiest way to wrap your head around it is to think of it like a frequent flyer program, but for your degree. It's pretty simple. You do things the university wants you to do, and you earn points, or in this case, coins. But here's the twist. Unlike regular old airline miles, these coins have superpowers. And that superpower comes from a technology called programmable money. What that means is you can literally build rules into the currency itself. So you could design a coin that can only be spent at the campus bookstore, or one that expires after graduation. This programmability is the absolute key. It's the secret sauce that makes sure the coin is always used for its intended educational purpose. Okay, so that's the what. Let's get into the how. How would this actually work day to day? Well, the value of any EduCoin really just boils down to two simple things: how you get them and what you can get for them. So, how do you earn these things? Well, there are the obvious ones, like getting good grades, but the paper suggests it could be used for so much more. We're talking about getting coins for just showing up to class, for participating in discussions, even for things like volunteer work or summarizing academic articles. It literally turns all that effort into a tangible, valuable assets. But here's the million-dollar question. Would any of this actually work? Would students even care? Well, the researchers asked them directly, and the response was, frankly, overwhelming. A massive 89% of students said a system like this would genuinely, truly motivate them to study more. That is a huge signal. Okay, so they're motivated to earn them. But what would they spend them on? This is where it gets really revealing. The number one answer, by a huge margin: school fees. A whopping 91% said they'd use the coins for that. But look at the next two: the ability to retake a failed test and getting advice on an assignment before they turn it in. These aren't just little perks. These are high-stakes, high-value services that could dramatically change a student's academic path. And the list of things they wanted just keeps going. I mean, 83% would use coins to get access to internships. 78% would spend them just to get some one-on-one time with a teacher. The coin creates this really powerful, direct link between a student's hard work and the opportunities they want the most. Of course, an idea this big and this different comes with some major questions. I know what you're probably thinking, because I was thinking it too. So let's get into the big hurdles: fairness and funding. Right, let's just get straight to the point. If these coins have real value, where does that value, the actual money, come from? A university can't just fire up a printing press in the basement. So the paper proposes a pretty fascinating solution, and it's based on what the students themselves said. Turns out 63% of them believed their parents would actually be willing to purchase an initial bundle of EduCoins for them when they first enroll. And just like that, you've seeded the system with an initial pool of value to get the whole economy started. Okay, but wait a second. The moment you say parents can purchase coins, I'm sure some alarm bells start ringing. Doesn't that mean students from wealthier families get a massive unfair advantage? Isn't higher education supposed to be about social mobility, not making things even more unequal? It's a huge, critical question.
And the researchers totally anticipated this. They built in a 3-step plan to keep things fair. First, you means test students to identify those from lower income backgrounds. Second, you grant those students a free allotment of coins right at the start, so they're not beginning from behind. And third, you put a hard limit on the number of coins any parent can buy. The goal is simple: reward effort, not wealth.
So, beyond the grades and the motivation, the paper suggests that the EduCoin could have a much deeper, more psychological impact. It could be a powerful tool for building something educators call learner agency.
So, what exactly is learner agency? Well, it's that feeling of being in control, of having ownership over your own education. It's about making that shift from being a passive person sitting in a lecture to being the active driver of your own learning journey.
And to really understand why this matters, you have to hear this quote from a student in the study. It's heartbreakingly powerful. She explains that even though teacher office hours are completely free, she doesn't use them. And why? Because her parents paid the tuition. She feels like she hasn't personally earned the right to take up the teacher's valuable time. That right there is a perfect, painful example of low agency. Now, this is where the EduCoin could be a total game changer. By earning coins through her own hard work and then spending those coins to buy the teacher's time, the entire dynamic just flips. It's no longer a handout that she feels like she doesn't deserve. It's a resource she has rightfully earned. That simple psychological shift could empower so many students to finally get the help they need. And students came up with all these other amazing ways they'd want to use coins to take control. They talked about using them to vote on class rules, to access counseling services, to start their own clubs, or even to buy a creative business idea from another student. It's about taking ownership of their entire educational world. So in the end, an idea that starts with just improving grades actually touches on everything from motivation and fairness all the way to a student's fundamental sense of self-worth. And it leaves us with this one really provocative question to think about. Could this kind of targeted, programmable money actually be a key that unlocks a whole new era of student potential? It's definitely something to chew on.